Alright guys, so let's get started on the track. First thing I want to do is establish a groove for the track, which we're going to use throughout the track to keep everything in line, in time, and funky, you know what I mean? So in order to create a groove, all we need to do is create half a bar, you can see half a bar of a MIDI clip here, and then just drag that down. Whoops, and then just drag that down here into the groove pool. So this is no groove whatsoever. So I'm just going to delete that, obviously. But let me explain to you a couple of examples here. So no groove sounds like this. It's straight. Every note is falling directly on a 16th note beat division there, and it's boring, really boring. So let me show you what a lot of guys do with their tracks, and I feel like it's a bit too much groove, but basically you can check out the triplet grid inside this MIDI editing window, and you can move every second note over to the triplet grid, and what you'll get is a late second note which kind of sounds like this. And I feel like that's a bit too much groove, especially at 110. So what I like to do here, let's just actually drag this into the groove pool, and we can compare later on. So what I like to do is actually just drag every second note over by, well, this is 32. We're dividing the half a bar into 16 pieces. A full bar would be divided into 32 pieces, 32 slices, but we actually want to go in a bit further. So now we're looking at 128 slices per bar, but this is half a bar, so there's 64 there. So I want to just drag this over 2, and this is what I found to be a really nice middle ground between having a bit of a groove and not being too much. So let's have a look at these three and compare them. So you can see in the straight groove, they're all hitting, here let's go to 16ths, they're all hitting right on the 16th note. Too much groove is on the triplet, and it's just a bit past where I have mine set there. So if I look at the triplet grid, you can see there's the triplet. It's way over here, much closer to the third note, I'm sorry. And so the groove that I like to use is just a bit before that, and you can see it falls on that on the well, we're still on triplet. Yeah, on the 64 beat divisions. Anyways, so let's throw this down into the groove pool. So we've got our too much groove and then our Slynk's funky groove smiley face. Okay, so we're done with the creating a groove part. Let's get into programming a drum rack. So I'm just going to start by creating a new MIDI track here on this drum rack, and there's nothing in the drum rack right now. I'm just going to throw in a hi-hat just from the core library. You can go into samples, and this all comes with Ableton, so you can go here. And I think I spent a little time going through these, and I just chose this one to be like a fairly decent hat to start with. Hat. I'm going to rename that, and we'll set that to one-shot mode so it plays all the way through every time we trigger this. And we'll set our grid to 16ths, and we'll just play a hat every note, every 16th. So now you hear this. Alright, it sounds very straight right now, doesn't it? That's where this little groove section comes into play down here. So we've got our two grooves in the groove pool, and you can see them here. So sad face is too much groove, smiley face is just right. So let's check out the too much groove. Yeah, see what I mean? Like, it's a little bit too much, you know. Funky groove, a little bit better. Alright, let's go back to putting some more samples in. So I chose a couple of just to speed up the creation of this track. I've picked out a couple of samples. I made a kick and a snare especially for this this video tutorial. They're taken from my Future Loop sample pack. So we're going to drag these in. Nice and easy, one shot. Make sure we rename it to just kick so we don't get confused. And I got a snare here. And we'll rename that snare. It's good to rename things and make sure that everything is nicely named and colored and stuff so that later on you don't get confused with what's what. I'm going to pitch this snare up a little bit just to make it sound a bit tighter, a bit faster. And we'll just go with like a simple, yeah, let's just actually, we don't actually need these notes to be this long. And so if you shorten them, it makes it easier to see in this view. So we want a snare on the 2 and 4 and a kick on the 1 and 3 for a simple kind of, whoa, okay, that's way too fast. What am I talking about here? Let's back up a bit here. Yes, like this. Okay. Nope. Yeah, there. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. I'm already getting confused myself. So, let's just tighten this up a little bit. All right. So you can kind of hear how the groove on the hats kind of makes that sound a bit nicer. And just for comparison, let's turn the groove off. That's no good. And then too much groove. Yeah, like some people like that, but I prefer to go with this one. So I'm just going to delete this too much groove that we created in the groove pool. And yeah, now we have a little pattern going on here. I'm going to rename this channel Drum Meat because I feel like this is the meat of the drums, and you'll see why later. This is our big kicks and snares, and I'm going to take away the hats for every time we have the kick and snare. So it's all right, cool. So what I'm going to do now is start layering up some percussion-y type stuff underneath that. So I'm just going to create a couple more channels and put them in a group. Just Control J to make that a group, and then call the group breaks. I don't know why I call it breaks. I guess you could call it percussion or whatever you like. And we're just going to set a color for it so it's nice and pretty. And now we're going to go into dragging in a couple of drum breaks that we have picked out here. So those of you who've heard some of my music before, you can, I'm sure you realize that I sample lots of old funk records and whatever. So I've picked out a couple of drum breaks from some old funk records. Let's have a listen to them. Then we got this one here. Okay, we got this one. And you can see that they're not quite in time with everything else. That's the Amen break. I don't think we'll use that one actually. Yeah, we'll use that one. And yeah, okay. So now we've got to go in and make sure we've got all these warp markers set up right so that it matches the timing of everything else correctly. So also I find a lot of newbie producers really make a big mistake here when they don't really understand the warping algorithms of Ableton. There's several different decisions that you can make here with warping, but when I'm warping drum breaks or beats, I like to use beats mode, obviously. And this little guy down here, this is the looping mode. So if I check out the info here, you can see that if I turn the looping mode off, it will not loop anything, and each segment will play to its end and then stop. If I don't have that turned off, what will happen is, you can read there, each segment will play to its end and then loop back and forth until the next transient is triggered. So we don't want that because it's going to create some strange artifacts right in between these two notes. So we're going to turn that off, and then it's just a matter of hitting the 16th grid and making sure that all these markers are bang on the mark. And this is, you get good at this and quick with this the more you practice. One trick is you can hold shift while our transient marker is gray. This is a pseudo transient marker, and you can drag it around and decide where you want to put it before you let go of shift and then click it into place there. And we'll just do the rest of these really quick. And we don't need that one, or do we? Yeah, maybe we do want that one. I'm not sure. See, this one's a bit off, so what you can do is hold shift and then you can drag, whoops, you can hold shift and then you can drag the audio behind the marker and get it nice and lined up at the beginning of that, whatever that is, some kind of kick or something. I'm not sure about this here, we might remove that transient marker. And these transient markers are very important because we have our warping algorithm set to preserve the transients. So wherever these markers are, Ableton's going to chop right there, and then it's going to play each of these sections individually according to what tempo we're at. So let's have a listen to that now. All right, we can loop that over the whole duration. All right, not bad. Let's turn the groove on now. Here, this note here is really swung because it's on a 16th. And remember, every second 16th is getting pushed to be a little bit later. So all of these are fine. All of these are going to be played at the exact same time as normal, except for this one, which is going to be pushed back a little bit, and that gives it a funky bit of a swing there. Yeah. So let's do the other ones, and then we can mess around with. Yeah, let's just change that. We can mess around with some of the, chopping it up and swapping things around, because we don't want to just use these breaks exactly as they were recorded, because that's boring. We want to, mess with them a bit. We're professional producers. All right. And if my memory serves me right, this kick at the end of the loop sounds better than the kick at the start. So I'm just gonna have the loop beginning at the end there, if that makes sense. So now we've got this. Yeah, let's make sure, we should probably put that there. All right, let's turn the groove on. Cool, a lot of interesting sounds in there that we can chop up and use later. So actually, while we're here and we've got two of them done, let's see an example of how we can chop that up. I'm just going to mute these two because we haven't figured them out yet, and mute the drum meat. So it all sounds a bit like chaos right now. We've got two drum breaks playing at the same time, and they're doing different things. It's not really a cohesive sort of drum break there. So what I like to do, actually, maybe we should decide on a better pattern here first. Yeah, let's change the pattern up a bit here. We can go for a bit of a breakbeaty kind of drum. Something like this. Something like that. And actually, while we're messing with this, I'm going to hold down Control and drag this to a new, what would you call that? Spot? New spot? And what we'll do is drag an EQ onto here, and we're going to EQ some of the bass out and some of the highs. The goal here is to make what I like to call a ghost kick or a pre-kick. In the control, fade in. So let's fade this in a bit so that the volume will rise up over this duration. So it sounds like this. So this is really neat to use at the end, or, whoops. Oh, you know what? We're getting confused because there's two kicks. We've got to name this pre-kick. All right. So if we put that pre-kick here, Hear how that kind of goes gadunk, and like this one is like a little bit muted, a little bit softer than the other kick, but it's still the same kick. That's just a stylistic thing I do sometimes. I'm gonna select this whole section and press Ctrl J, and that's going to consolidate it into one long MIDI clip. So we can do it only, you know, after a whole 2 bars there for a bit of variation. Ba-dum. Cool. Another neat trick inside of the drum rack is if we click this button here and then this button here, it opens up some more options. The main one being the choke that I want to look at here. Excuse me. So what does the choke do? Well, if you set them all to the same choke number, 1 for example, what will happen is if the snare, for example, is playing and that tail is like coming out, and then we have a kick playing right after that, it's going to cut the snare off and then play the kick. Let me give you an example of that really quick. So if we put a snare here and then a kick right after it, hear how the snare kind of gets cut off? So it's playing the snare, and then as soon as the snare sample gets to here, it plays the kick, and it stops the snare sample altogether. And that's a really subtle, minor thing. It can be a cool style, you know, if you put a kick right after a snare in some places. But mostly I do that for the mix down, so that to make sure that we don't have a kick and a snare playing at the same time, which is going to boost the volume unnecessarily up. We want to keep our levels nice and clean and flat. You can see the levels are pretty flat there. And I think I'm going to add the hat to the choke as well, because we're only playing the hats in between the other samples. Cool. So now that we've got a bit of a pattern sort of established here, boom, 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 we can start to chop up these 2 breaks to mirror that. So because we've got this laid out nice, we can see, you know, that's a kick, that's a snare, that's another kick, etc. So in our breaks section here, that's a snare, but then we have a hat there where the kick should be. So let's delete that and stick a kick there instead. And then we have another snare. No, that's a hat, sorry. Let's put a hat there. And I like that open hat. That sounds really cool, but we're going to do that sort of over here somewhere, so I'm just going to delete that. And then we want a kick here, and then a snare, and then a hat. Cool. Copy that, duplicate it over here, and we've got this pre-kick here that we made before, and this kick in the break is kind of like a pre-kick as well, so that'll be great there. And we'll move the open hat here just to change it up a bit towards the end of the pattern there, the end of the sequence. Alright, following me? Another thing I like to do with these breaks is there's a tricky little 100 orange thingy down here, which is actually called the... Oh, let me just get this back. It's actually called the transient envelope. So if I bring that down, you can hear that each sound is getting played from each transient, but then fading down in volume. The smaller I put this, it just turns into like little clicks, right? So that's a cool way to like tighten up your sampled drums. So I'm going to set that to like 25 or something. All right, but we don't want to do that to this. We want to have the open hat, so let's increase that back to 100, and here as well. Nice and tight, nice and groovy. Let's have a listen to that with our main drums. Alright, so you're probably noticing that the master is peaking. We're going to tidy that up in the next video. So I'm just going to do a very similar thing to the rest of these 3 breaks, and then we'll get back into like doing some side chaining and mixing the drums a little bit better, and we might add a crash and whatever. So cool, I'll see you in the next video.